What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Over Analysis. Today we're continuing our series looking at the best and worst ADPs round by round. Today we're going to be talking about round 9. And the round 9 guys are definitely a little more interesting than what we saw in the round 8 spots. When we get to this range in the draft, we're starting to see less and less guys that come with a decent floor. There are, however, a lot of guys that have a chance to significantly outperform their ADP in this range. And really, from this point on in the draft, you want to be taking swings on guys that have that league-winning upside. So currently being drafted in round 9, we have Kenneth Gainwell, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Addison, Jakobi Meyers, Jonathan Brooks, Josh Downs, Travis Kelce, Jacory Croskey-Merritt, Wandale Robinson, Jayden Reed, Aaron Jones, and Jordan Mason. So starting off the round at the 901, we have Kenneth Gainwell of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Gainwell coming off of a season with the Pittsburgh Steelers in which he finished as the RB16. And the big thing that went right for Gainwell last year was that he was heavily involved as a receiver out of the backfield. Gainwell had a career-high 85 targets, catching 73 passes. The previous career high for Kenneth Gainwell for targets had been 50, a number that he set back in his rookie season. And the success that he had in the passing game for Pittsburgh was a big draw for him going to Tampa Bay this year. The Buccaneers are going to be looking to do a running back by committee situation, and Gainwell is a perfect committee type of back. He's a guy that can come in on the third downs and 2-minute drill situations, be a reliable target for Baker Mayfield out of the backfield, and hold up in pass protection. And Gainwell's already gotten really strong reviews from the Tampa Bay coaching staff through training camp. They've already been referring to him as their 1B back behind Bucky Irving. So I definitely think there's a lot to like about Kenneth Gainwell here in round 9. He's already going to have access to most of the valuable touches in this backfield, given that he's almost a lock to be playing on third downs, 2-minute drills, and obvious passing situations. I think he's a guy that you're going to be able to plug into your flex spot or even your RB2 spot on bye weeks at times this year with confidence that he's going to be able to deliver you a decent fantasy performance. And at cost, I would much rather be taking Gainwell here at the 901 than I would be taking Bucky Irving in round 4. Coming in at the 902, we have Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Lawrence coming off of a breakout campaign in which he finishes as the QB4 overall in his first year with new head coach Liam Cohen. And once Lawrence really started to understand the Liam Cohen offense, that's when the breakout started to occur in the second half of the season. The thing that really gave Lawrence a boost last season was that he had a spiked season with rushing touchdowns, scoring 9. His previous career high was 5, which he had done in his second season. So while the touchdown rushes might regress a little bit in 2026, I think that Lawrence can make up for that by continuing to improve in the passing game. And Lawrence last season, the passing numbers were good, but they weren't great. He finishes with just over 4,000 passing yards and 29 touchdowns. So I think there's definitely room for him to improve on those passing numbers, especially given that we're going into year 2 of the Liam Cohen offense. And again, this is a loaded group of wide receivers that he's got to work with. And if the reports are true about his chemistry improving with Brian Thomas, if Parker Washington continues to build on what he was able to do while he was breaking out at the end of last season, Lawrence also has another offseason to work fully with Jakobi Meyers, a guy who he was just able to get used to when they brought him in through a trade in the middle of the season. And it's also another full offseason for Travis Hunter as well. So there's so many paths to growth here for this pass. So again, even if the rushing touchdowns fall off a bit this year, I could see the passing numbers increasing to a point where Lawrence is throwing for about 4,500 yards and maybe 35 or more touchdown passes, and that would be more than enough for him to pay off his ADP in this range. At the 903, we have Jordan Addison of the Minnesota Vikings. Addison was a bit of a disappointment last year. He was one of many victims of the J.J. McCarthy situation in Minnesota last season. After finishing as a wide receiver 2 in each of his first 2 seasons, Addison really fell off last year, only scoring 3 touchdowns and finishing as the wide receiver 45. And so while Addison comes in with a pretty reasonable wide receiver 43 price tag in the 9th round, he's going to be a guy that I'm going to fade in this range. So Addison out in Minnesota, even though he's had a couple of decent wide receiver 2 finishes in the first 2 years of his careers, both of those years he was very much touchdown dependent, coming away with 9 and 10 scores. So if the touchdowns aren't happening, then he doesn't really offer you much of a floor, and his upside is really capped because of all the target competition. And obviously he's always had to compete with Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, but now you also have to add in Juwan Jennings, who the Vikings signed in free agency this year, to the mix. So with Addison, you've got a guy that's got both a limited floor and a cap ceiling, and that's not a pick that you want to be making at this range of the draft. I want to be going for ceiling. I don't want to settle for a guy that is occasionally going to have spiked weeks, but is not going to happen nearly frequently enough that it's going to outperform the draft pick that I put into him. And then at the 904, you have Jakobi Meyers of the Jaguars. And after he was traded to the Jaguars midseason, Jakobi Meyers turned in a couple of really nice weeks. He had a nice little run where he had 3 straight weeks of over 15 fantasy points, although he did fall off in the fantasy playoffs and had 2 games in weeks 16 and 17 where he finished below 10. This year, the situation for Meyers is that he's probably going to be the wide receiver 3 for Jacksonville. It's hard to imagine him taking on a bigger role than either Brian Thomas or Parker Washington. And much like Jordan Addison right before him at the 903, there's really no ceiling for Jakobi Meyers here at the 904, or if there is a ceiling here, he probably needs an injury to either Parker Washington or Brian Thomas in order for him to really have a chance at outperforming this ADP. Meyers is a guy that you can dependably put in your wide receiver 3 or flex spot and rely on him for 10 to 15 points a week. You can't, however, expect many spiked weeks from him, and there aren't going to be many situations where he's going to win you a week himself. Meyers is just not a very exciting pick here. He's fine, but there are guys with higher ceilings that I would prefer to chase in this round instead. At the 905, we have Jonathan Brooks of the Carolina Panthers. And Jonathan Brooks is a guy that a year ago was just completely left for dead by the fantasy community. Well, over the last couple of months, he's been soaring up draft boards. And when you're looking at guys that are potential league-winning picks, one of the things that you want to look at is, does this player have a path to a much better role that he might end the season with, as opposed to the role that he might start the season with? And I think that's absolutely the case here for Jonathan Brooks. Brooks is only behind Chuba Hubbard on the Carolina depth chart, and Chuba Hubbard is nothing more than your average dead zone running back. He's a guy that's inefficient, inexplosive, and he already lost the starting job once a year ago to Rico Dowdle. Brooks has also got nothing but positive reports from all of the Carolina offseason programs. And if Jonathan Brooks is truly healthy, it's going to become more and more obvious as the year goes on that he's going to need to take over the lead job from Chuba Hubbard. And Jonathan Brooks is just the kind of pick that I love to make in fantasy. This is the kind of upside swing that we're looking for in this stage of the draft. I also think that Jonathan Brooks is a far better pick than any of the running backs that are going in round 8. Let's go back to round 8 for a second and think about some of the guys that are coming in with higher ADPs right now than Jonathan Brooks. In that range, you had guys like J.K. Dobbins, who we've seen the J.K. Dobbins story for over half a decade at this point. We know he's not going to make it through an entire season. We also know that he's in a frustrating backfield that is going to be unpredictable week to week in Denver. And then you also have guys like Kyle Monangai and Blake Corum, guys who are clear RB2s, RB handcuffs that have no chance to overtake the primary guy in their respective teams. Like Kyle Monangai is never going to be the primary back there above DeAndre Swift. Blake Corum is never going to be the RB1 there above Kyron Williams. But Jonathan Brooks in round 9 absolutely has a chance to finish out the season as the RB1 in Carolina over Chuba Hubbard. So Jonathan Brooks, I think, is a great pick at the 905. Even if this pick doesn't work out, even if he gets injured again, or he doesn't end up taking over the backfield from Chuba, this upside swing comes in a range of the draft where it's not going to cripple your fantasy team if it doesn't work out. And in round 9, I need to be going after guys with serious upside that have league-winning potential. I don't need floor plays at this stage. I have my stability from the guys that I selected in the first 5 to 6 rounds of the draft for that. And a guy I would prefer to chase in this round at the wide receiver position is Josh Downs going at the 906. And for Josh Downs, a lot of things have just gone right for him this offseason. It started when the Colts traded away Michael Pittman, which freed up a ton of targets and a starting role in 2 wide receiver sets for Downs. Also working in Downs' favor is the fact that Alec Pierce, the guy that the Colts paid to be their wide receiver 1, has been unable to practice this offseason with an ankle injury, and there's still no timetable for his return. But again, even if Pierce were healthy, there's still so many targets now opened up by the departure of Michael Pittman, and Michael Pittman last season finished as the wide receiver 18 with just 80 receptions for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. And also the Colts have not added any kind of competition for Downs either. There was some talk at one point of them possibly adding Keenan Allen, but nothing's come of that. So Downs right now being drafted as the wide receiver 45. And again, even if he's just able to duplicate the production that Michael Pittman was able to do in a similar role last season, then that alone is going to be more than enough for him to significantly outperform this ADP. So Josh Downs is just one of my favorite picks in this round. I think that even if Alec Pierce is healthy, there's opportunity here for him to be the number 2 target in this Colts offense. And that opportunity as the Colts wide receiver 2 is going to be enough for Downs, who's being drafted as a wide receiver 4, to at least finish as a high-end wide receiver 3, if not in the wide receiver 2 ranks. Coming in at the 907, we have Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. Kelce last season, believe it or not, finishes as the tight end 3 with just over 70 receptions, a little over 800 yards, but only 3 touchdowns. The tight end 3 finish is a little misleading though, just like the tight end 2 finish for Kyle Pitts is very misleading. It's so much more an indictment on how bad the tight end position was in fantasy football last year. Do Kyle Pitts and Travis Kelce really finish as the tight end 2 or the tight end 3 if guys like Brock Bowers, Tucker Kraft, Sam Laporta stay healthy all year long? I'll let you answer that one for yourself. The thing that's really hurt Travis Kelce's fantasy numbers over the last few years are that his touchdown scoring has just completely cratered. He's gone from a guy that used to average double-digit touchdowns to a guy that struggles to get to 5. Now that being said, this is still Travis Kelce. He is still capable of playing at a high level. And is it ridiculous to think that he could run hot with touchdowns for one more season, one more year with a double-digit touchdown finish to send him off into the sunset? I don't think it is at all. So I really don't hate the ADP here for Travis Kelce. I'd rather be taking him than taking the mid-range tight ends like Tucker Kraft, Harold Fannin. Certainly I'd rather be taking Travis Kelce at this stage than George Kittle coming off of a torn Achilles. But I also think there's much better tight end value waiting for us in the double-digit rounds. So ultimately, Travis Kelce in the 9th round, I'm going to pass on. There are other guys like Jonathan Brooks, like Josh Downs, and a couple other guys in this range with league-winning upside that I'm going to be going for above a guy like Kelce. And speaking of another guy in this range that could potentially have league-winning upside, you have Jacory Croskey-Merritt at the 908. Now, Croskey-Merritt had a very frustrating rookie season. He got a lot of hype coming out of training camp, especially when the Commanders decided to trade Brian Robinson. At that point, the ADP for Croskey-Merritt just got completely out of control. He was going in the round 6, round 7 range last year, and people's expectations were just completely unreasonable for a guy who was a 7th round rookie. And again, with these rookie running backs, it's something that I continue to talk about. These guys just don't hit the ground running the way that we want them to in fantasy football. It takes time for these guys to develop and understand all the nuances that they need to understand to succeed in the NFL. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, these guys were all-world prospects and first-round picks, and their rookie seasons were considered disappointments by a fantasy football standpoint. It took time. It took till the 2nd season for either Gibbs or Bijan to be fully unleashed. So if it took time for those guys to be fully trusted to succeed in the NFL, then we should absolutely be a little more patient with a guy who was a 7th round rookie. And Washington also doesn't bring in a lot of competition for Croskey-Merritt this offseason. They use a 6th round pick on a guy like Katron Allen, who again, a rookie running back. It's going to take time for him to be trusted if he's going to be a factor at all. They also bring in a veteran like Rachaad White, and Rachaad White has had some starting experience with Tampa Bay, but there's a reason the Bucs went and took Bucky Irving and had no interest in bringing Rachaad White back. He's an inefficient player, and he's not a guy that ideally you're going to be giving a full workload to. Add in the fact that Croskey-Merritt has gotten a lot of positive reports throughout training camp, and I think the potential is here for a breakout in year 2. I think it's very possible that we were just a year early to the Jacory Croskey-Merritt party. And again, a 9th round price tag for a guy that has potential as a 2nd-year breakout is the kind of swing that we want to be taking at this point in the draft. And then at the 909, we have Wandale Robinson of the Tennessee Titans. Wandale coming off of a breakout campaign with the New York Giants in which he finishes as the wide receiver 14, now reunites with his former head coach Brian Daboll, who's now the offensive coordinator for the Titans. And a wide receiver 46 price tag seems pretty low for a guy like Robinson, who just significantly outperformed his ADP a year ago and is now stepping into a situation where he's going to be one of the primary weapons for this offense with a young quarterback in Cam Ward. Now, a lot of the concerns I had with Cam Ward that I talked about for Carnell Tate in round 6 also apply to Wandale Robinson. So I don't know that Cam Ward is the long-term answer for the Titans. I don't know that he's going to throw for more than 3,000 yards, more than 20 touchdowns. These are numbers that he struggled to hit in year 1. If that happens again in year 2, then he's going to tank the values of these Titans pass catchers. But there's also the scenario where Ward improves year 2, especially under Brian Daboll, who has had success in the past with guys like Josh Allen, guys like Jackson Dart, and even got a decent year out of Daniel Jones one year in New York. And between the two, I'd rather have Wandale Robinson in round 9 than I would have Carnell Tate in round 6. But there's also much more appealing options here in round 9 that I don't have a lot of interest in Wandale Robinson still, even though it's not a bad cost for him. When you look at the receivers in round 9, I would take Wandale above guys like Jakobi Meyers or Jordan Addison. I would not, however, take him over Josh Downs, and I would not take him over the next guy we're going to talk about, which is Jayden Reed coming in at the 9-10. Last season was just such a lost year for Jayden Reed. He only plays in 7 games, and he finishes as the wide receiver 115, with just 19 catches for a little over 200 yards and only 1 touchdown. If Jayden Reed's able to stay healthy this year, he's in a much better situation given that the Packers have finally started to trim some of the fat in that crowded wide receiver room. Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks are both no longer in the picture, so basically you're down to Christian Watson, Jayden Reed, and Matthew Golden as the top 3 receivers. And Christian Watson, a guy who was a fade for me in round 6, is a guy that struggled to stay healthy throughout his career, so if Watson does in fact go down again, then there's going to be plenty of points where Jayden Reed and Matthew Golden are the top 2 receivers on this team. One thing that fantasy managers have really been hoping for over the last 2 years has been for Jayden Reed to get any kind of expanded role after seeing him finish as the wide receiver 29 and wide receiver 25 in each of his first 2 seasons, and he did so despite only playing around 60% of the snaps. With less target competition, I think it's absolutely possible that Jayden Reed does finally get that expanded role that we've all been hoping for the past couple of years, and if he does, then I think he's a lock to outperform this round 9 ADP. And then coming in at the 9-11 and the 9-12, you have the 2 Minnesota Vikings running backs, Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. And last year, Jones and Mason were both hurt, just like every other skill position on the Minnesota Vikings. They were hurt by the J.J. McCarthy situation. Now that Kyler Murray is the starting quarterback, you hope that Minnesota's offense returns to just a competent level. And if it's able to do that, then I think at least one of these guys is going to turn out to be a decent fantasy option. And between the two, I have more interest in Mason at this point than I do Aaron Jones. I think Aaron Jones is just at the point where he's breaking down and it's going to be harder and harder for him to make it through a full season. And while I think that Aaron Jones would more than likely still get most of the receiving game work, I don't think that's enough for him to be viable fantasy-wise. Jordan Mason, however, if the Vikings are in fact a much better offense than what they were a year ago, and they're getting a lot more goal line and red zone opportunities, then I think that's going to increase the floor for Jordan Mason significantly. I could see a world where this becomes a decent offense again, and Mason has a ceiling of 10 to 12 rushing touchdowns. Mason would still obviously be pretty touchdown dependent since he's not going to offer much in the receiving game, but in this range of the draft, you could do a lot worse as your RB4 than a guy like Jordan Mason that is going to have the primary early down work and the goal line work in what could be a better offense than what it was a year ago. And that's going to do it for this one, guys. So in round 9, I think there's really a lot to like here. Whether you want to go for an upside running back like Jonathan Brooks or Jacory Croskey-Merritt, or a quarterback in this range like Trevor Lawrence, or even a wide receiver like Josh Downs, Jayden Reed, or even Wandale Robinson, there's a lot of guys that carry significant upside and guys that have a chance to really outperform their ADP in this range. And again, in this range of the draft, I'm looking for guys that have ceiling. I'm looking for guys that can completely outperform their ADPs and finish as running back 2s, wide receiver 2s, or high-end wide receiver or running back 3s. I'm not looking for guys that are floor plays like Jakobi Meyers in this range. I'm not looking for boring, safe picks. Again, I have the stability from the first 5 to 6 rounds in the draft for that. But I thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content today, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and I will talk to you next time when we go over the guys in round 10.